Welcome back, climbers. I'm your co-host, Kaylee Floyd, and this is another episode of Climbing Mount CMMC. In today's episode, Bobby is joined by Amira Armand from Curie Solutions. Now today, they are going to be talking about scoping. This is a very important part to the CMMC journey, and we're so excited for you to join us in today's podcast.
So what scenario are you thinking about for paint?
Well, I think, one of the biggest challenges is, for a client who's going to be engaging, you kind of touched on it a little bit with an MSP. How would they draw their scope? How would they do their scope knowing that they have an MSP? And then if you're an MSP, how could you do your scope? But there are other not as challenging ones that we could maybe start off with that maybe off the top of your head you'd prefer to start with. But those are two because that's the industry I'm in. Obviously, I'm preferential, but that doesn't have to be the case of what we go with.
Oh golly, let me see what I can do here.
There it is, folks. You're welcome.
So okay. Oh, sorry. All right. So we've got a client's network over here, which has got things like DCs, maybe file server. We got clients, Windows, right? And then we've got some, who knows, BYOD cell phones out here.
You're making it hard then. Okay.
All right. And then we've got an MSP. So this is Acme Corp, and then we have Super MSP. Now, any MSP is going to need to manage their clients in an efficient manner, and there's different options for it. You could have one option is the MSP could have an RMM cloud. Think ConnectWise.
Mm-hmm.
And then over here, the MSP has got their own network, right? So the MSP is going to have a bunch of laptops. MSPs can travel light, right? Maybe they've got a file server. Maybe that's on a cloud somewhere. Maybe they have a SharePoint for internal instructions and procedures, and they probably have a ticket system.
And I think, for those who are listening to this, I think it's really important for you to understand, it's one thing to kind of just say, well, I'll just engage someone, but you really do need to understand how the MSP is operating when you go to engage with them, because you don't want to find out during an audit that they don't do the things they need to be doing in order to be successful. Don't take a pinky swear on that. Just personal preference. Because this is realistic how she's drawn it. A lot of MSPs operate this way.
Security incidents.
Sorry if I derailed you there, but
no. This is the tech laptops, right? Are they downloading CUI files? Right,
could they download CUI? Do they have the ability to?
Do they have the ability?
Right.
Yeah. If the tech laptop is going directly into here to do work, yeah, they surely do. Or you might be having the tech laptops connect to the RMM cloud and then going down from there, which reduces the risk, right? But there's still the risk of downloading those CUI files at the cloud level. And there's a whole nother layer of admins in the cloud, right? We forget that clouds have people behind them. So there might be
Yeah, we'll put in tickets and we'll be like, hey, we're having this problem. Yeah, I'm in your system now. I see what you're talking about. Yeah. This is a problematic issue. We'll go in the back end and fix it. they, they were literally right in our system. They could see everything that we saw. So
Right.
yeah.
So when you call the phone number, where is that person answering from? Are they in India? Are they in the United States? Are they in a different company or a different country? This is a real concern because anytime you have a cloud, the people who are on the back end doing administrative work, they can do anything that you can do. And they can also do it for every other client they have. All right? Just because they don't doesn't mean they can't.
Right.
So if you do stuff like you pick up a file from this network to analyze it, and you're putting CUI into the cloud, well, now we're storing, processing, transmitting CUI in this cloud, which is a big deal, right? That's where you get the FedRAMP requirement for it. And every RMM cloud that I know of has the ability to pick up files from those endpoints.
Yeah.
You can quote turn it off, right? But that's a very optional little slider you've got there. It's not a hard coded thing.
Right.
But if you do this sort of connection from a scoping perspective, it's actually a much better scope, because as an assessor, I only need to look at the security of this cloud. I need to look at that really, really hard right now. Okay, so this is for the joint surveillance, voluntary assessments. This is with the way the proposed rule is written today, where we don't really have the security protection data fully enforced in the rule. We're expecting it, but it's not. They kind of forgot to make a period at the end of the sentence, unfortunately. Right. But we also have to look at any other source of data, right? So if you are an MSP and you're completely cloud-based, then your network is actually going to look a little bit more like this, where each of these are separate clouds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
True.
And now we need to make sure that these individually meet the requirements, but we can outsource the security from. We can send Microsoft an email saying, "Are you FedRAMP or are you secure?" And they say, "Yes, we are," and we're good, right? Essentially, there's a little bit more to it. There's a lot more to it, but
I'm following you.
But if you have this stuff in-housed, well, then you do need to do, right? That's now putting a lot of work on your side that you need to do.
Right.
So most of the MSPs that we work with, we actually, depending on if we can find a cloud that really is FedRAMP, if we can find a cloud that's good and secure, we're going to be like, use that cloud, get as much off of your personal stuff as possible, so that we don't need to assess these laptops, for example, right? But if there is literally no solution, then you do have to in-house it. So I'm sure, Bobby, you can think of some situations, RMM clouds, right? There's no FedRAMP RMM cloud out there.
Not that I'm aware of yet. And now there are some that allow you to self-host, so that opens some interesting possibilities.
Yep. So
that's
we
a whole other can that I don't know if we want to go down, but yeah.
So, well, if you decide to self-host, that can be easier and harder, right? It's easier than having literally no compliant solution.
Right.
It's a lot harder than outsourcing to a cloud. So if you do self-host something, and I'm just going to take out this little word cloud here, then you need to do all the requirements for this customer-facing network, right?
But at that point, the MSP is controlling their own destiny, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they can know whether they were going to pass or not. And that's the attitude that we took, just because we wanted to control our own destiny. So we wanted to put ourselves in a FedRAMP based cloud, and we wanted to basically host as much as we can. What sucked is exactly what you said, is now there's more responsibility for us to track and manage and keep track of that. And it's hard, it was great when we were able to just, let the cloud provider do those things that they're supposed to do. We review and analyze the risk, but that's just not really practical right now as it stands, with such little tool support in the ecosystem, especially with security protection data still looming around like a boomerang. You're not sure which way it's going to come back in, and whether you're going to catch it or it's going to catch you on some of that.
Right. So if you do self-host, then you're going to need to make, your boundary around the system. I always consider these laptops to be something, if you can consider that a contractor's managed asset, I would try. Right. And if you do the boundaries right, if you do the scoping right, you should be able to take your technician laptops and call them a CMMA, right? Never put CUI on them.
Right.
Never perform a security function directly from that laptop. Use them as a jump host. And that will mean, under the current scoping rules, that we want you to do common sense security for these laptops, but we're not going to make sure that they are secured to the utmost. Instead, we will be trying to make sure that, your file server, which has the network diagrams, your RMM, which has access, right? That's a biggie. Your ticket system, which has security incidents. If you have a log server or SIM, we're going to need to make sure that's secure. But those would be in scope for potentially all requirements, the way the DoD is going.
So, I was at a conference, I think it was late last year. I had a fellow MSP come to me and said, hey, I know that you've been doing this podcast and you've been talking a lot about our industry and some of the challenges we have. And we have our own private colo hosted system. And do we need to make that FedRAMP? And I was like, my response was, no, you just have to include it in scope. You just have to, whatever components you have, you just include it in scope of your CMMC assessment. Mm-hmm. You don't have to build a FedRAMP just because it's in the cloud if you're self-hosting. That's been my attitude and perspective about how I read that, but I'm just curious your take about that. I'm bushwhacking you on that one. Sorry,
I wish I had a better answer. So the definition of what is a cloud has been in flux and under discussion for years. And there's some organizations, for example, NIST, has put out a definition of what is a cloud, which makes a lot of sense to lots of people. Makes sense to me. It's a instantly scalable, on-demand, self-service situation where, if you want to set up a server, you don't have to call anyone. You just press a button and the server compute starts up, right? That's an awesome definition of cloud in my book. That's based off of NIST Special Publication 800-145. If you want to look it up, it's about 6 pages long. Great definition. Matches my understanding of what a cloud is. But the DoD has other potential definitions of cloud. And those other definitions can range from any storage of information, period, makes something a cloud, to the provision of services to make something a cloud. And most people, if you did a poll, they would go, that's not a cloud, right? That's not the AWS that I'm used to. that other definition you're talking about sounds real similar to me as an MSP bringing a server back to my office to fix it before I take it back to the client. Do I need to have FedRAMP just because I brought the server back to fix it for 2 days? And we don't know what the DoD is going to go with, unfortunately. Now, if there is room for interpretation, your assessors are going to try to be smart about stuff. We're not trying to make everybody in the entire defense industrial base fail their assessment. There's no point to that. We need suppliers. We need manufacturers. So we're just trying to make sure people are addressing risks up to the minimum threshold set by 80171 CMMC. And we want to say, go forth and do good work, right? Penalizing people is not the point of this. So I'm hoping that there will be room for interpretation where an assessor can look at this thing and go, wow, that does look like AWS. That is a cloud. It needs to be FedRAMP versus it's a room in a data center, guys. Like, right? And it's cold storage. You don't even have it turned on. It's a colo, right? This is not a cloud. This is just another company, just like you. If you have to do CMMC, they should have to do CMMC. We should be able to make that decision. We're still waiting to see how firm DoD is trying to be.
Yeah, my perspective has always been that if it's part of your business process that you have about how you operate, that even if it's a colo and you include it in scope, you should be good. But I didn't really think about how if you're providing it as a shared resource that you're hashing up and sharing out, boy, that starts to really make things more complicated, and the waters get a lot more muddied. Good point.
Yeah. If you really want to noodle on it, what if an MSP has 3 clients and the MSP performs shared services for those 3 clients, does that make them a cloud? No. No. Okay.
I don't think so.
What happens if the MSP performs shared services? They're doing patching and remote management and stuff for 50 clients. Does that make them a cloud? Right. What about 1,000 clients? Well, you start wondering, right?
Starts getting interesting at that point.
Yeah. It's a hard problem.
I interrupted you. I'm sorry. I ambushed you. Keep going. You're doing great.
What I can say is in this diagram, which we've been kind of ignoring. If the MSP looks like this right here, right, I would definitely want to assess them separately. I'd want them to have their own CMMC level 2 assessment. And I would be looking at this as a CRMA. Let's assume that the file server, the RMM, and the ticket system all have security protection data in them and or access to the client. I would be looking at them as probably assessed the same way as either a CUI asset or an SPA, right? Which, according to the scoping guide, is exactly the same. We have to fully secure them with all the requirements.
Right.
We don't really actually know how to categorize these things when we're doing an independent assessment of a network, because CUI asset is supposed to be, it has CUI on it, right? Well, are we changing the word CUI to security protection data? Is it a security protection data asset? That seems to be what the DoD wants us to do when we're scoping. It's just kind of, if it has logs on it, then we use the same CUI proximity scoping. But anyways, bottom line is all right. all requirements. If you don't like this, well, then there's a potential to either obfuscate the ticket system, right? So instead of having security incidents, you have a pointer to a more secure system.
Which is what we did. But
right.
yeah, we just and policy, administrative, all that stuff we went through and listed all. It's included in our training. Because right now, lifting up the whole ticketing system and bringing it in scope, just not super fun at this point. But I mean, I think as MSPs start to get larger, it's going to get harder to not have to. I mean, it's a business decision, right?
Right.
But,
and even with you, the ticket system still exists. You've just got the one for all of your clients that you're getting the phone calls straight in for. It's over here. And then when you have the more secure clients, you go sit at a different desk, essentially, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So if somebody says that they did that, totally fine, totally expected. We'll go assess the security against the more secure ticket system.
But you have to be willing to demonstrate your administrative controls are sound, right? I mean, you're gonna check some things, so we have to be able to prove what we're saying. Be prepared.
We do. That's part of our mandate. To do little spot checks to double check you. We are, as assessors, we're generally not going to go on a digging expedition.
Right.
That is actually outside of our mandate. If you say, I'm using this network over here to do the work, that other network, do not worry about it. There's nothing over there. We're going to take copious notes, right? We're going to write it in our assessment plan and our assessment report saying that we assessed this secure network. We did not assess that thing over there. And then it's on you, right? It's on that company that told us that information to make sure that they said the truth.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that's one of the things that's really great about when you do the interviews. You're asking various different people. And if they're like, yeah, that's out of scope. And then someone goes, so when I'm doing this from here, and you're like, wait a minute. What did you just say? You're like,
right.
That network is supposed to be out of scope. And you're talking about how you're doing this practice in that network. And then you bring your notes back out and it gets even more interesting in the assessment.
It's really hard to keep a secret. It turns out,
right.
When especially when you talk to users, they make mistakes, right? They just tell you how it is. Oh yeah, I do it through email all day long.
Yeah.
Right. Why would you say that?
Yeah.
But for the smaller MSPs, if you're not trying to handle multiple CMMC clients, you should be really looking at, should you even have any of this stuff in scope? Right. So for example, there's absolutely a bunch of cybersecurity professionals. They're just independent consultants. They're running around with a one-person company, and they should not be keeping the network diagrams on their own computer. They should not be keeping notes about stuff on their own computer, right? They should be using the client's system for this stuff.
Their RMM tool, if they did, or whatever their patching mechanism that they're using.
The client hopefully has their own RMM tool of some sort, right?
Or they're Intune. They could use Intune to manage a lot of those functions, and you just manage their Intune. Like you don't necessarily have to.
Right.
Host
so that's another thing. So if the client has a cloud, right? So maybe this is the client's cloud up here. The security of your computer that's managing that cloud does not matter. because it's going through an extremely secure Fort Knox gateway to get into that cloud, right? If this cloud-based RMM was going to get attacked from the outside, they would have been attacked by now. Your little laptop that is not very secure is not going to move the needle on that security, right? So as long as you keep the connection from your laptop to the RMM to the client, that does a really good job of, again, keeping these laptops a contractor risk managed asset or even out of scope. Look at the specialized asset categories. Mm-hmm. Look at contractor risk managed assets. Talk them through with an assessor. Not the assessor who's going to assess you, but get somebody who's really knowledgeable about scoping and talk through how you can use administrative controls or logical controls or technical controls to put things into those buckets so that you don't need to do all the security for them, so that you don't need to be assessed against every single requirement for them. The specialized assets are an area that people are not talking enough about, and I'd love to really deep dive and talk more about them because
I'd love that.
Yeah, so maybe part 2, maybe part 3, but there's so many IT people out there that have a server that they can't secure, right? Or a system that they cannot secure, and they're like, we're doomed. We cannot do this. There's no hope, right? There's just, I can't get this thing secure. I can't do the thing. It'll break our business. And they think that there's no path forward. And this is literally why we've got the specialized asset categories. And there's a way of going through the logic to explain why this thing that cannot be secured. I'll tell you that the cheat sheet is, if you can't perform your work without that server, and you can't secure it all the way because it would break the work, right? And you need to have CUI on that thing because, again, you can't do the work without it. That meets the definition of some of the specialized assets. Mm-hmm. So you just need to be able to explain it or articulate it, and assessors will be willing to go with it.
That's so key, is the understanding aspect of it. There's so many times where a client, the truth is the truth for them, right? But they can't convey it in a way to an assessor that checks the box appropriately so that they can move on because their level of understanding isn't there. But if you have someone who does understand what a specialized asset is and can communicate correctly to the assessor and say, this is the criteria, this is what's going on, and they can back up that perspective about how they operate, man, that is such an easier process. And that understanding is so critical.
Yeah. So maybe part 3 or part 4.
Well, that's very exciting for me. Amira, thank you so much for joining us today and, sharing this information that we've had. I learned a lot through just going through it and talking and sharing and just kind of peering a little bit into some of the many JSVA situations or other situations you work with clients and dealing with scoping. It's such a critical aspect. And from my perspective, when we were first starting our journey, we made so many mistakes around scoping. It made us just kind of redo everything over, rewrite SSPs, just do so much. So getting it right up front early just can save you such a considerable amount of time. So this is just so valuable, that what you just shared. And as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube to stay up to date on the latest CMMC news. We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode and listen out for the next one. But until then, keep on climbing.